Should Bears fans and folks with Bears on their fantasy teams have hope? That more this week on the couch, joined by the birthday boy, always looking so youthful, Bob Harris. Should Bears fans have hope?
No, they should have zero hope this year. I mean, like they should have hope because they're fans. They're going to have some hope, but also they're going to have that self-loathing that goes with being fans, and they'll be able to cash in on that big time over the course of the rest of the season because an immediate turnaround is not coming. We've seen this movie before with Thomas Brown, by the way. In Carolina, and like I think his chances of fixing this are similar to what he tried to fix in Carolina, but could not. So, like, right, this is going to be a lengthy process. That doesn't mean that Caleb Williams isn't going to be all that and more. It just means that he's not that this year. And I think there's a lot, I mean, it's 3 straight games. It's been a long time since they've scored touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
And 38 sacks for Caleb Williams, and somewhere David Carr is going, damn, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like there's a lot wrong, and not the least of which, we heard the reporting, that maybe some of the teammates were ready for him to take a seat, which is the opposite of what we heard with Anthony Richardson at the time, and we'll talk more about it. But the teammates felt like, hey, he's holding us back, and maybe that explains some of the actions of DJ Moore. And like, you think about DJ Moore, a guy has been 100% quarterback proof over the course of his entire career. Like, he played in Carolina with late career Cam Newton, and then downhill from there, right? Yet he was still one of the most productive wide receivers in the NFL over the course of his time there. And, and then he comes to Chicago and has a good year with Justin Fields, or for our purposes, a good year. This year, he can't do a darn thing. So, and then he's leaving the field at strange time. Just a lot of bad, weird vibes there. And so, like, maybe all this comes down to Matt Eberflus not being, a great leader of organizations. And, it strikes me as we watch some of the other teams that are having success right now, let's say the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
You look at the Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes situation, or let's look at, the team they played Sunday night, who lost, the Houston Texans. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we all made fun of Nick Caserio.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you find the right combination of coach and GM, a dynamic young leader like D'Amico Ryans or a Dan Campbell or somebody. I mean, I think that part of the equation of an NFL team is easy to overlook until you're looking at it and going, man, this isn't it. Right. And so I think Chicago, and it's like not a new problem in Chicago. It's an ongoing problem in Chicago. And I don't know that the personnel on the field can overcome all that.
Yeah, not this year. There's a lot of good stuff to go through there. Another name that popped into my head when you were talking about the positive model, Bob, is Dan Quinn and what they're doing in Washington.
I was going to mention it. It's 100% true.
And again,
new ownership.
Right. And GM
Peterson
coach alignment, right? You saw the hug after the Hail Mary, the alignment. Teams are families, and sometimes they're dysfunctional families. And you also have, as you mentioned, ownership and organizational culture, which starts with ownership, is present in so many of these stories, it feels like, right? Or it's why these stories stay stuck. You change the names, except it's Ryan and Matt in Chicago. It always has to be Ryan and Matt. You change the names, but it's the same story. It ends up being the same story. Now, drilling down on this Bears story, what I do wonder about, again, thinking of Washington or thinking about Drake May in New England or thinking about Bo Nix in Denver, you do wonder that Caleb Williams really is the poster child for the NIL player empowerment era of quarterbacks, right? He already was the master of his own destiny before he got to the NFL. And I know that there were some old school NFL types that were kind of uncomfortable about him. And I wonder if a little bit it's bearing out that maybe he's a little bit aloof for a leader compared to these other, because when we hear veteran players were calling for Tyson Bagent, I don't care whether it's true. It's kind of like an urban legend. Just the fact that it's getting out there is true in a sense that it's taking the temperature. It's showing you the temperature that's going on. And I do believe that there probably is a bit of a rift in terms of who's most at fault for the offensive failings. But Thomas Brown's not the guy that's going to fix it. Although it's funny, again, you talk about what happened in Carolina, again, ownership and the jerking around, and bad choices in coaches, and then realizing it's a bad choice, but very, very clumsy. Everything around Thomas Brown, but he was the passing game coordinator. Now, the one story I could tell is before the bye, the Bears looked like they were figuring it out on the pass offense. Offensive line also was an issue for this offense for so long. It seemed like last year, especially as the year went on, they were figuring it out, right? So offensive line woes, that's an issue. But what happened? How does it? Normally, teams, if they're getting better going into the bye, that trajectory continues after the bye,
Right.
and it bottomed out. So maybe I don't know if Thomas Brown was getting overruled. I don't understand. I agree with you though that if anything, people are looking for a bounce for DJ Moore or a bounce for DeAndre Swift. It's probably time to get out. Caleb Williams for this year, maybe
Right.
Caleb Williams down the line. Now let's talk about another organization again with these issues in Indianapolis and Anthony Richardson. Is there a potential happy ending here in terms of fantasy, in terms of where this franchise feels like they're at with their young quarterback?
Happy ending for fantasy is possible, although I don't know how we're going to trust playing him on a week to week basis in games that matter the most to us without a series of good games here in the short term. Right. Like, I'll just go back to the decision to pull him. Made no sense to me. I mean, it makes less sense in with having the benefit of realizing that the man who came in to win the games, that the whole reason you bailed on the development, and they all knew this, right? This was not a secret. Anthony Richardson is not an experienced player. He needed to be developed, and that's why you started him in year one, right? And you threw him out there, and he got hurt, and that changed that dynamic. But this year, if your argument was, oh, well, we need to win games over developing this quarterback, then you drafted the wrong quarterback. You knew this guy needed development, and you hoped to win some games with his athleticism and maybe playing better defense and all those things that you weren't doing as well. And so I just felt like it was a bad move. It made no sense. And I felt in the moment that this was maybe a function of players after the tap out, right?
Right.
Which for us old people, that's like, how could you do that? Like,
Mhm.
and I'm like old people, but a little more forgiving about some of these things. Like, it seemed odd to me, right? But also it seemed like, wow, another sign of a very inexperienced player, right? Just in general. And you knew this should come as no surprise. So I was, I thought maybe when they, the decision to pull, I just thought, like, is it worth trading in a few wins, or do you really think you're making the playoffs to go with a Joe Flacco? And like for fantasy purposes, at that point, like, hey, I want to get something out of Josh Downs and the other receivers, and I didn't see that happening. But from an NFL perspective, it made zero sense. It makes less sense now that you look back and say, wow, we lost 2 games, and we lost 2 games of possible development for a guy that we believed in so much. We made him the 4th pick overall in the draft, and we put all our chips on him. And like when you listen to Chris Ballard talk about him heading into the season or coming out of last season, he said all the things that I totally believe.
Yeah.
All the things I believe in part because Matt Waldman whispered them in my ear. By the way,
Ah.
I'll acknowledge that. But that's part of what I do, right? Like I'm looking to hear, I'm grabbing in, I'm digging into that string of lies, the bowl of lies, and pulling out that thread of truth. And when you start getting coinciding versions of a story from different voices, you start to think, this one rings true. And so it did ring true what they were trying to do. And so it all just went by the wayside, whether that was ownership. I thought maybe it was the players based on the tap out. Then we heard Stephen Holder from ESPN reporting, no, the players,
Mm.
the players were fine with it, and I'm going, wow, man, this is really not a good look then for Ballard and Steichen. And of course, we think of the owners in some of these teams, and of course that is Ursay is one of those. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I hope we get a game or two out of Anthony Richardson in the short term that lends the kind of confidence that we can play him to be what we drafted him to be. Because I think that player is still there. That player's not gone
Oh,
away.
yeah.
That super high end athlete who's capable of changing games with his legs, but also with one big pass. And there were how many times, Sigmund, in the games that
Mhm.
he came up short, was he a fingertip away from 1 or 2 touchdown catches that would have changed our whole outlook on him? And that's the thing about all these players, right? Like, it's a game of inches. It truly is. And we would be having entirely different conversations about an awful lot of players if those inches had closed a different way. And Richardson's one of them.
Hey, this is absolutely the last point you made, and there's something to take out of life here, and I don't know if it's something that makes you feel that much better. It should make you feel, if you're feeling good, grateful very grateful. You should always feel grateful. Gratitude's like the number one spiritual vitamin out there, appreciation and gratitude. But there's so many things that if this bounce goes this way, I always call it the oblong ball factor. There's so many things
Exactly.
in the NFL. And certainly you have one picture where this never happens. And I think the Occam's razor explanation for all this, Bob, is it had to be ownership. It had to be ownership coming in and saying, that's it. We have to see Flacco, and then they weren't any better with Flacco, and then it made it easier to say
An
like,
owner
okay,
who saw the last month and a half, month plus of Cleveland last year, right? That saw,
right, right,
they said, "I want that."
yeah, and an owner that also, sorry, that based on what we know, is like a simplistic thinker, not a sophisticated thinker.
So,
Okay.
how much of this for owners though is just the fact that they're all about the timeout, right? They're all in
Hmm.
their, they're all
Oh,
old
jeez.
people, right? Like, if you're an owner in your 80s and you're not having success, right? You see the end is near, right? I mean, like, does that not drive
Oh
decisions?
my gosh. No,
I
you're
said on
right.
my I
On
said
your
on my
birthday.
90th birthday.
Right, on your birthday. No, this is perfect. We're getting totally better. You're the best, Bob. I mean, it's always so thoughtful, and we're tying everything together. But you're right, and something that I said that honestly kind of made my soul go, "Oh," when I said it, recently this year was, in essence, the NFL is a board game for billionaires. All the game pieces are like the players and the ball and everything, but it's just a board game for them. And you're right when you think about it, like, is some of the lurches that we're feeling down here on the ground level covering this so intently and feeling every bump and every single jerk left and right that happens is because the kid. I think of it as a board game. You're thinking of like the kid playing the game up there. The owners are emotional about it. They're just emotional about it. And like you said, it's the light, the dying of the light. Um, but you hope that this interruption in the plan, because I don't think it was the players, and Quentin Nelson really stood out to me. Like, I don't know personally, I don't have firsthand knowledge of who the veteran leaders are of the Colts, but boy, Quentin Nelson seems to fit the bill of someone that would be a veteran
He
leader
does.
of this team. And he was so pro Anthony Richardson that he was almost saying, I don't agree with the decision,
Right.
which is wow. That's pretty big. That's a pretty big deal. That's like when Michael Parsons is blaming the coach.
Correct.
You don't hear, I mean, look, we hear lots of petty sniping and stuff, but there's certain stuff you're like, whoa, that's outside of the range of the petty sniping that we hear, which I think is just a sign of the dysfunctional family that some of these organizations are. But I also think that Anthony Richardson is early enough in his development and he just seems like a real no nonsense, like salt of the earth, straightforward guy. Almost makes you feel like, is that going to be why he fails? Because you have to be different. You
Yeah,
have to be,
I was just reading some of his quotes right now. Like, he's
yeah,
grateful for the last 2 weeks of, being able to see the game in a different way. And like, look, I'm super hopeful for him because I was so invested in him. And
yeah,
as everybody out here listening or who's read my work knows, I was all in going in, and I mean, like, I was responsible about it. Like, draft a good second quarterback. You're taking a
sure,
chance. It's a risk play, but nobody like Sig. Who remembers who came in second place?
nobody,
Right? That
yeah,
like nobody. So that's the approach I like to take, and I'm a little more aggressive. And so I was fine being aggressive. And this is you do that accepting that this is a possible outcome. That a player, like, I could tell you the same thing of CMC investors who are probably going to get something they wanted out of their guy down the stretch, but you're not getting that number one pick overall return on investment anymore. That went out the wayside
yeah,
when he missed the first 2 months of the season. So, like, this could happen to pretty much anybody. And I know there are people out there who will say, "Oh, I told you so" on Richardson. Well, you just don't know. And this is something, Sig, that we
hmm,
all need to come to grips with. Being right and being wrong are not permanent conditions in this
no,
world. They are temporary situations, circumstances that you find yourself in. And I think as fantasy analysts, we often tend to be, I don't want to say ahead of the curve, but we're aggressive and we want to stand out. And so we see things and we want to just bang on them and drive the point home of what we're looking at. Like, because what we're trying to do is share with our audience. What I'm trying to do is share with my audience what my process is, how I see things
yeah,
and why I
yeah,
see them and what I'm looking for. And then they can use it to put that in or incorporate what portions of that into their own processes that they like to use. But But when I'm doing this and I see players with that level of talent and that upside, I mean, the numbers were undeniable last year when he was on the field, and I mean, readily acknowledge it's a narrow band, right? We're
Sure.
working on slim evidence here, but it's evidence nonetheless. And I'm willing to take a gamble on that, especially in an NFL where there are 28 quarterbacks who I could probably play any week if I had to. And some of them might even be high end. Like, who's the quarterback I have on most of the teams where I had Anthony Richardson? Kirk Cousins. I'm gonna be okay.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
so I mean, I think that's part of it, but I want to be aggressive on the players that I feel, and it's the same reason you're aggressive on Christian McCaffrey. He's literally a player and a half at his position, proven over time. And so, you realize that that there's a range of possible outcomes. Here comes Matt Harmon into the conversation.
Mhm.
The range of possible outcomes. And so, like, you take all that into account. And that was part of the thing with Richardson. Look, I hope like hell, like, as as hard as I pushed him, he turns into the thing I pushed him to be. And he may well. By the end of the season, like, remember what was it in 2020? Probably if we were having this conversation at this time of the year in 2020, part of the conversation would be Tom Brady can't complete a deep pass before he finished that season as the most effective deep ball thrower in the NFL, right? And that's
Mhm.
part of the right and wrong being temporary conditions, right? And so we go into a season and we have these things in our mind. We've told ourselves happy stories all off season to convince ourselves to draft players in positions or at prices that maybe we wouldn't otherwise draft them at. Or we've told ourselves horrible stories about players that we don't want to draft. And now we're learning how right or wrong we are. But even in that, we're only right this week or next week or the week after. In the big picture, the right or wrong is determined well down the road on all these things. So keep that in mind, kids, as you're out
Yeah.
there thinking about your Anthony Richardsons and your other shares of players that are maybe coming up short, or the players you missed out
Right.
on that you wish you hadn't. Like, you learn from it. It's all a process, man. I've been playing this game for more than 30 years now, like heading into my 34th, 35th year of playing
Whew.
fantasy football, and been wrong way more than I've been right. But the times you're right are so satisfying, it makes the wrong times worth it.
Yeah, it's hard to win fantasy
It
championships.
is.
And you have to have mostly persistence. You can't win without persistence because you're not going to win with the lineup you drafted. I mean, best ball is not in the conversation here, and you're right. You're correct. Listen, because the
In the
right wrong
moment.
paradigm. But with the right wrong paradigm is like I like to say, you can be right and wrong in the same season. You can be wrong for the right reasons. You can be right for the wrong reasons. So and then Joe just shared this, and people always should come back to that old Taoist story about
Right.
the
Yeah.
horse getting away. And it is important though, and I think it can help with spiritual health and therefore downstream emotional health and psychological health. That story about the horse got away. Oh no, that's bad. We'll see. Horse came back with three horses. That's good. We'll see. Oh, one of the wild horses, your son fell off and broke his leg. That's terrible. We'll see. Oh, the conscription for the army came in because your son had a broken leg and you have to go. That's great, right? We'll see. We'll see until the season's over. That finality, and then we spend all off season together.
Right.
And go
I
ahead.
don't want anyone to get the wrong idea here, because I'm sure you do it as well as I do it. And I'm not very good at it, but I spend every Sunday watching games in horror at the things that I've advised people to do
Sure.
or not do are
The
coming true
exact
or not
wrong
coming true.
thing for
Right.
sometimes the exact wrong thing. Yeah.
And like, even in, like, you'll be watching that, like, it turns out games are 4 quarters long and not one long or two long,
Sure.
right? And you'll find by the end of the game, you're going, oh, thank goodness I
It's
was right.
okay.
But we're sitting here and it's not like we're taking a cavalier attitude towards being right or wrong. It's a serious business because it's a business. That said, you have to understand and be willing to accept you brought in the right factor. The ball is designed to bounce funny ways, people. That's your starting point.
Yes.
That's your starting point, right? So everything in the NFL is designed to make this very difficult and to have the outcomes be totally unpredictable, unless you're in Vegas, and then they're totally predictable.
Right. Look, and then to put a punctuation mark on this discussion about Anthony Richardson, and I'm with you, and I was also feeling great about Anthony Richardson this year. I thought take Anthony Richardson or Jaden Daniels or both, um,
Sure.
and for the same reasons, right? And Richardson and Daniels were particularly exciting because it's the combination of the running quarterback and in Richardson's case, you have that extra bulk for the goal line and being a primarily a deep passer. So you have lots of upside in the passing game. And it seemed like Shane Steichen understood that. And like you
Yes.
said, the Colts were really gung-ho about him and saying, hey, this is a guy that has this incredible package, a constellation of talents. He has very few starts. He needs to learn on the job. We're willing to give him that opportunity. We understand what we have here. Shane Steichen seemed to understand what he had here. And I give the players more credit that, well, they didn't want to suffer through this period while he's learning. I want to say something to make me say sorry, Joe, because players understand that stuff. They understand that stuff. The players are going to be
So
like, we have to lose while he's learning on the job. Players aren't like that. Go ahead.
right, and the thing about Steichen, I thought he was a super plus because he had done it both ways. He had developed
Right.
quarterbacks two different ways: a
Right.
passer in Justin Herbert and a run first or more run oriented guy in Jalen Hurts. So you
Right.
thought, wow, he's got the ideal convergence of experience and
Yep.
coaching and player and you bring up Jaden Daniels, and I'll just no victory lapping here, but I mean, like, the advice was, if you miss out on Richardson in rounds
Yeah.
5 or 6, then Jaden Daniels is waiting for you in rounds 9 to 10,
Exactly.
whatever. And those are the home run plays you're looking for, right? And so if you're thinking you can get Lamar Jackson 4 rounds later or 6 rounds later, then you're drafting Lamar Jackson. Look, I drafted my share of Lamar Jackson. Happy I have him. But part of fantasy football is getting guys that outperform their value, right? And it's a big part of it. And so those were the kind of options. And Jaden Daniels, bless him, bless
Oh,
him. It's slowing down a little bit, and it's possible that opposing defenses are figuring out some things. The accuracy was never going to remain at 70% ish.
right.
That was going to come down a bit too. But the big playability is still there. The running ability is still there, and so don't panic, Jaden Daniels investors.
No, no, not at all. In fact, they had a rough game against the
Yeah.
Steelers. Daniels was under pressure a lot. There were some drop passes. They had a really rough, like on their report card, that's like a C-D kind of offensive game, and they scored 27 points.
And they were down 2 offensive tackles, right? I mean,
Right. Right. So everything's going to be fine with Washington if they're getting back off of that's more positive conversations about organizations doing things the right way. The Washington had a really long afternoon against a really good defense, by the way. Scoring 27 points against the Steelers is not an easy task. They were the second best scoring defense in the league going in to Week 10. Everything's going to be fine with Washington. Great game, great Thursday night game. We're rare to say that. As
Philadelphia, Washington. Yeah.
and we'll see. And like to your point, Vic Fangio. What can Vic Fangio crib from when the Steelers, going back to that game last week really quickly, the Steelers have always given Lamar Jackson trouble. Always. Even whenever they didn't have any kind of offense to hang with him, they still would often play close games with the Ravens because they understood, to boil it down to something, oversimplify, make him make a decision early in the play. Just make him make a decision. Just like, don't let him sit back and in this passive mode and then wait until they can land hit the jugular. Make him make a decision, and then the play proceeds based on that decision. And you're dictating the terms to him instead of him dictating the terms to you. And I think they did something very similar with Daniels. And that's, by the way, Steelers and Lamar Jackson this week, showdown week around the NFL, Buffalo and Kansas City. Minnesota, Tennessee is not exactly a showdown, but I want to ask you what you think about Sam Darnold. Because we're talking about organizations and how organizations can steer players' stories into their story, even if the player appears to have some other trajectory, right? But then sometimes players just, no matter what situation you drop them into, eventually their story is going to override that, right? And it seemed like, well, hey, no. Sam Darnold, I mean, San Francisco was interested in him. These highly structured offenses, Kevin O'Connell, Darnold comes in. And they have a really tough schedule to open. Oh, it's going to be brutal. Before McCarthy got hurt, it was like, what week is McCarthy going to take over? That was the conversation, right? Or do you take Justin Jefferson at number 5, knowing that Sam Darnold's the quarterback? That was the conversation. And for the first 8 weeks of the season, folks really couldn't have been more wrong about Sam Darnold and about what his fit was going to be in this offense and what was going to happen for fantasy. And he was going to get TJ Hawkinson back, right? You have a really rough half against Indianapolis. Then they kind of figured out in the second half, but then you just have a rough game against Jacksonville.
That
And
you
it's
should
that,
not have had a rough game against.
no, and it's that look on his face. It's the opposite of the look on Joe Burrow's face. Like the resting look on Joe Burrow's face is,
It's
I'm
the
in
seeing
control.
ghost looks. I mean, that's always
It's the
gonna. That's
ghost.
right. That's
So I mean, should we put stock in this? I mean, should we start to alter our expectations for? Because if you said I'm not taking Justin Jefferson because of Sam Darnold for at least 1 week, this is right. You were right for this week. You can be right in the second half of the year.
I I want to say, like, maybe I'm putting too much faith in Kevin O'Connell. And I loved Kevin O'Connell after the game. If you saw his post game comments, I cannot repeat all of them because I don't have all the sorry Joes with me. But but he was firmly committal with Sam Darnold and made it clear to the locker room that we're 100% with this guy. And not that they have a choice, right? Like, I get it. They need him to come through. Like, again, the guy that we saw early in the season is there. Needs a little bit of protection. I think the trade they made to shore up the offensive line after Darisaw was hurt was like a sign that they realize what they need to do to keep
Hmm.
Sam Darnold on point. And so, like, I think the staff and the organization understands what they need to do. I'm hoping that this game against the Jaguars was a total outlier, right? Like the 3 interceptions all going to Jefferson, that was odd, right? And so, and like the Jaguars don't really have a lot for anybody, and so I just like it's hard for me to imagine that this is the norm, but yet here we are. So, like, it is one of the outcomes. I argued going into the season, like I argue every year, Sig, that I'm not scared of drafting wide receivers based on their quarterback. And we can point to Justin Jefferson. We can go back to last year, the 5 games he had after coming back from injury with playing with Josh Dobbs, Jaron Hall, and Mullins.
Right.
Those 5 games, he was wide receiver 3 over those 5 games. Like, I'll go to Malik Neighbors, who I told everyone to draft. I was all in on, despite him playing with Daniel Jones. And we all know, we like, and like we can see that. Like, I'm not pretending it's great. I'm telling you, when those situations where we have quarterbacks and they're less than ideal quarterbacks, they create value for very talented wide receivers. Jump on that value, reap the value. It's worthwhile. We can go back, over the course of time. Like just last year, Baker Mayfield turned out to be way better than we expected, right? But the fears of Baker Mayfield depressed the prices of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin
Right.
drastically. 2 years ago, Geno Smith did the same with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who both were top 20 wide receivers. And like, I could go back. Amari Cooper playing with Jacoby Brissett for half a year or 11 games was wide receiver 8, right? Like, so don't don't overthink the quarterback in the equation. Think about it. But like, we were all drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at the tail end of the first round or early in the second round because Kyler Murray was so much better than Daniel Jones. And we're like, is that worth 4 rounds? I don't know. So
Hmm.
it's something I think about every year, and I try to leverage that. I try to find those values and take advantage of them with great players. But clearly, like, it's ideal when you have a great quarterback, right? And like,
Right.
and in
Right.
some of those cases, the quarterbacks turned out to be a lot better than we expected, and we thought we were heading that direction with Darnold. And we may get back. There may be a course correction here. I feel like something you said is probably truer. Like, he is who he showed us he's been. That's entirely possible. But I do have a lot of faith in the coaching staff here and Kevin O'Connell. I think, like, a totally, if there's a coach I have a lot of faith in, him, Matt LaFleur.
Yeah.
There are coaches who I believe in, who get the most out of their players for sure, and I think he's one of them. So if anybody can fix this, I think O'Connell can. That said, I don't know that O'Connell can. I don't know that
Well,
this is fixable.
and you brought up LaFleur, which is a good one because I think Jordan Love went through a stretch last year
Sure.
when everyone's like, "Well, that failed. Like, this isn't going to work." The Jordan Love, there's a reason he didn't start for that long, et cetera, whatever you want to say. But the reports always were that the team in the locker room, the team was always behind
Yep.
Jordan Love, and he knew that the team was behind him. And if that's the case, like you started with, that's important. And again, we're talking about stories. Like, Kevin O'Connell's going to pull this into his story and keep Sam Darnold from reverting back to the story he had. And maybe, and then I'll hand it back to you because this is a good topic. And you're right that there's not one simple answer to should you avoid wide receivers based on quarterback. And part of the problem is it leaves such a scar when you have a DJ Moore, when you have a wide receiver that you watch and you know he's good, George Pickens for most of last year. Like, you know he's good. You're like, that guy's good at football. But then you see DJ Moore go with Justin Fields, and all of a sudden DJ Moore is DJ Moore. So surely he'll be fine with Caleb Williams. Surely. Well, maybe not. But I think we can look at quarterback plus organization. So why should we not have been as worried about Evans and Godwin organization, right? When it's like you said, the coaches. So let's not just look at the quarterback. The Daniel Jones, that's a great pool. The the Daniel Jones thing has been mostly correct, but it can still Drew Lock and Matt Walden's made some good points. Check it out this week at Football Guys Top 10. We're subscribing for that alone. So these are the things we wrestle with. But I think you're right to say if you're not sure, just take the guy you know that's good at football, and things will work out.
So the thing about the quarterbacks, like I mentioned more, let's look at the list of quarterbacks. Late career Cam Newton, Taylor Heineke, Kyle Allen, Will Greer, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, the Carolina version, PJ Walker. All those years, he averaged 1,100 receiving yards a year, 3 straight years in the Panthers with those players as his quarterbacks, right?
Right.
I'll stay in Carolina. Adam Thielen last year was wide receiver 12 through 12 weeks, playing
Sure.
with the worst quarterback arguably in the NFL in Bryce Young.
Right.
10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, or if I transpose those numbers, and if I did,
Sure.
does it matter?
No.
And he ended up as wide receiver 18. I'm going to tell you, he had a less than ideal quarterback, yet here he was producing far exceeding the price you paid for him. So I'm going to stand by this because I think it's 100% true. And that's what makes it so all the more perplexing what's going on with DJ Moore right now in Chicago. He's proven it. He has his quarterback proof card, or I haven't withdrawn it yet. Let's put it that way. He has earned that over time. And we've seen many receivers over the years do this. You can think of Allen Robinson when he was good, having successful years with less than stellar quarterback play. I mean, it happens a lot. And again, I'm not pretending it's ideal, but I do think that really good players can transcend the talent around them and produce at a high level. So I'm not going to give up on that, but also, I mean, I pay attention to it. Do I want a player on one of the lowest scoring teams in the NFL? Well, probably not. But if it's the best player on that team, I talk about this a lot. I don't want to be mining the depths. I don't want to plumb the depths of bad teams, right? I'm okay skimming the surface and taking the best players on those teams. And in Carolina's case, what are they, a bottom 3 scoring team in the NFL? I will be playing Chuba Hubbard every darn week. Right. Because, and beyond that, I'm not that interested in playing a lot. Could I play Xavier Legette? Yeah, I could. Don't really, and probably am as a wide receiver 3, but am I going deeper than that? Sorry, Jalen Coker, I'm not.
And I think that what it stands for, Bob, is that generally you have offenses. I mean, the simplest way when we're doing draft prep or when you have tough lineup decisions, I think this also applies, is you want to be in good offenses. Good offenses are a multiplier effect, and you want to stay away from bad offenses. You want to stay away from offenses that you don't associate with success. However, now this part's more just the draft. When it's clear that there's a clear lead back or a clear lead target getter,
right,
and those players are discounted something like 25 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar from a player in a good offense that is similarly situated, a good offense running back who was as situated atop the backfield as Chuba Hubbard is like a 3rd round pick or a 2nd round pick maybe. But Chuba Hubbard was like a 14th round pick. And yeah, for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, but still it was some of the most important weeks in the sense that you could draft knowing that you can start Chuba Hubbard as your running back 2 if you have to, and you can kick the running back position down the block a little bit in the mid rounds if you liked other players better. And it made it easier to get a Jaden Daniels, easier to get a Brock Bowers, and so on, saying I'll just this is a really running back rich part of the draft, 7th, 8th round, but there's some other players I like because I know Chuba Hubbard's in my back pocket in the 12th, 13th, 14th round, and I can start him until Jonathan Brooks is back. Now, obviously, no one could have predicted Hubbard was going to be this good or that the Panthers were going to really slow play Brooks coming back, which makes you wonder if there's more to that or if it's just that's just what they did. And that sometimes it's just what they did. Nico Collins was ready to play last week, but they just decided to be conservative, which made sense to me, Bob, because they have a clear grip on that division, and it's an out-of-conference game anyway.
Yeah, there was no way he was playing on one limited practice. That's what I do going into Sunday
night. They were telegraphing it.
Yeah, everyone telling you that he's got a chance to play. Guys don't play on a single limited practice
unless it's Puka Nacua and it's the Rams.
And even he had more.
Maybe he had a couple of limited practices.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that was the thing. They didn't activate him until Friday. They could have the reporting on Tuesday was 100%. He's hit 20 miles an hour. Everything's good to go. Yeah. Right. So in this week, I would be playing him with a great deal more confidence, even knowing it's a Monday night game. But I want to do it without a fallback. I don't like to do anything without a fallback. Right. But still, I mean that I'm old enough to remember week 1 of this season on Monday Night Football with Christian
Uh,
McCaffrey, right? So
won't we all?
yeah,
And look, what was funny about that Nico Collins situation was everybody was scratching their head like, "Huh?" Because on one hand, you had reporting that he was full go, 100%, completely healed, and then you had him missing practice, and like you said, just the one limited practice, but then he was activated, and it's like, "But then this stuff doesn't add up." But it was all actually correct,
right,
and if anything, the Texans were showing us their mindset by only putting a player in who was
correct.
100% in one limited practice. They were like, we're just going to be hyper conservative about this. So they were tipping their hand on that. And everything that was reported, I think, was actually
I
accurate.
think so too. And like that can still be confusing people, and I get that, but I never felt confused by it. I
Hmm.
felt like it made perfect sense to me, and maybe like even the Jonathan Brooks, like I know people are confounded by it, but I mean I can see a lot of reasons for what the Panthers are doing. Like why rush? We've got this great player who's getting the job done. We can be very careful with a guy like we're not going anywhere this
Right.
year. You
Exactly.
know,
They're making
why?
decisions based on utility for 4 years, not just this
Correct.
year. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Speaking of accuracy, tell me whether you think this is an accurate statement. The Cardinals will be a top 10 offense after the bye.
I think if history repeats itself, they 100% will be. We go back to last year, what down the what final was it final 4 games? They were averaging over
Hmm.
400 yards a game. Kyler Murray was quarterback 7 over that span. They were rocking. James Conner was almost unstoppable. I see signs of that. I mean, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility because I saw it a year ago. So not inaccurate. How about that?
Yeah, well, and they didn't even have to keep the foot on the gas the
Right.
last 2 games that they played. Their defense, they're the new no-name defense. Their defense has been outstanding, and and, um, Kyler Murray, he looks like he's getting it. He looks like he's getting it in the Drew Petzing offense, and it looks
This
like
is a
they
case
go ahead.
this is a case where I might have misread the room. Like, I can go back to last year, the famous speech by Jonathan Gannon where, like, nobody was like the
Right,
whole team was like and I thought, "This is a miss. This is a miss." Turns out that this might be a hit. Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon might turn out to be a pretty solid duo, and Drew Petzing, like, I was pretty impressed last year with how Kyler Murray came in running an offense he'd never run before. Like
right.
that guy's been playing, some kind of air raid since he was 2 years old. Comes in last year cold, middle of the season, and ran it effectively. And by the end of the season, was running it like he'd been running it all his life. Like so, I definitely think that where you're taking this is like probably more likely than not.
Yeah, and again, and I've been tossing out this idea every week on the couch just to refresh it for people. When it comes to trades, and we're near the trade deadline in a lot of dynasty leagues. When it comes to trades, chances are 90 or 95% of the trades, one way or the other, are going to be the winner. And don't get too caught up on the margin. So, like, if you want to go get Marvin Harrison Jr., if the Cardinals are going to be this good down the stretch, then if you pay, as long as you don't do something like trade Justin Jefferson for him or something, you're going to win the trade if you're right. Don't get hung up on who you're giving up for him or how much you're giving up for him. Likewise, if you're going for James Conner, I think Trey Benson, boy, he has the look of a league winner if Connor goes down. And they're saying, and again, you're hearing the corresponding things. The game is slowing down for him. Lots of positive stuff. And I keep saying, Bob, I think this team is don't count them out of the Super Bowl picture. I would
Right.
not.
Well, what year was it that where we were having this conversation about league winners and David Johnson came up? Like it feels like like Trey Benson's in a similar spot. He'll need something to happen, right? He'll need some help, some injury help from James Conner because James Conner's not going anywhere. That guy is rock solid. But if something were to happen,
James Conner's
the
awesome.
the catchy phrase, the catchy contingent upside phrase will Trey Benson will personify that if it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you wanna get in or Trey McBride, the maybe touchdown regression comes his way, and even Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray in his range of outcomes, there's the range of outcomes again. I mean, number 1 fantasy quarterback for the rest of the season? Sure. I think that's possible because it seems like they're getting it. Okay, on the negative side, here's a note that I have, but I'm just curious. I won't tell you my outcome on this, but if you're holding Tyreek Hill, if you're holding Jaylen Waddle, what should you expect for the rest of the season?
You should expect they'll be sitting behind Cedric Tillman and Jawan Jennings.
That's easy. I mean, how can we go farther down on the list?
Yeah,
Maybe
we
maybe
could.
they're
Ricky
sitting behind
Pearsall.
Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, Jacoby Myers is like absolutely. I should have included him on the list. Look, last 2 weeks, wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 16. Go back to last year, wide receiver 24 on the season, playing with Devontae Adams. Now he's playing with a different Devontae Adams, a guy named Brock Bowers. Still doesn't have a great quarterback. Still doesn't have a great offense. Although Scott Turner and his pop Norv do know how to cobble together an offense at some point. So we'll see what happens. Like I'm not confident in Desmond Ritter. Jacoby Myers is absolutely 100% should be on the list of players you're out there looking to acquire right now.
Yeah, and the point being, I think for us to lay down that list, Bob, is there's a lot of players that you drafted or maybe didn't even draft, that you're looking at and you're like, "Am I really playing this player over Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle?" I'm totally with you.
What about
My
CD
note,
Lamb? Let's add CD Lamb to the list.
and that was Are you looking at my notes,
I'm not.
Bob? Your birthday powers here. No, and you're right. And the thing is, and I quote you many times a year, divorce the name from the numbers, because
That's the
of
plan.
and then you also
Not
the
easy.
lay and the layer of that is look at the why, and is the why going to change? Is the why going to change? And I don't see that it would. I mean, just this
Definitely
is
don't see it for CD Lamb. Like, so for CD Lamb, like, I don't know if the quarterback play can be as bad as it was last week every week. I mean, like, on accident, they're going to have
oh
some better
geez.
games.
Get the
I'd
Houston
like to
Texans
think
defense. Pick up the Houston Texans defense, folks.
pick up the Houston Texans
That-
defense for sure.
yeah.
But so that was like that was a outlierish bad performance in what was Lamb wide receiver 36,
Yeah,
35.
right.
So like but the point remains. I mean, how much better is it going to get? He's no longer a wide receiver one. Tyreek Hill has told us all year long he's not a wide receiver one. And like there's a point where I'm telling people, well, you're going to play him like you drafted him, and I get that, but you can't expect that outcome anymore, right?
No.
There are new Tyreek Hills emerging that you need to pay attention to, Cedric Tillman said politely.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, but there, that's the one of the hardest things about fantasy football is letting go of that investment you made in a player and all the happy stories you told yourself to get yourself ready to pay that price, right? That first round
Mhm, mhm.
price tag to land that player. It's just not going to happen. There's a point where you have to accept that it's not happening. And I realize how hard that is. Who did we have this conversation about last year? It was Stephon Diggs,
Right,
right? And like, man, I can remember the chat just railing me. Oh, you can't bail on him. Well, you don't have to bail on him. He bailed on you already.
right. Are you gonna figure that out? Boy, again, relationships. Yes. Yes, we're in agreement on this. And yeah, Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle. And some of the story is Johnny Smith is pretty good, unlike the tight ends they've had in the past. I mean, I just think that he fits more with what Mike McDaniel wants to do than what Mike Gesicki did. The other thing is, if you again, I love to do this thought experiment, Bob. If you didn't know anything about the pedigree of the players, how old they were, how much they're getting paid, and you just watched Miami and the Rams, you would say, "Who's this Washington guy? They need to use him more.
Correct.
Let's see the ball in his hands more." And Mike McDaniel loves him, so you have some other players that actually are threatening. I mean, look, it feels more threatening watching the game when Malik Washington has the ball in his hands right now than when Tyreek Hill does.
It does.
And,
And so I wanted to dial this back too, because like, like I get it. I was just telling you 10 minutes ago that I less than ideal quarterback play, like, and it doesn't ruin receivers. So these guys all don't have less than ideal quarterback play, I would suggest. I mean, like
Mhm.
CD Lamb does, but also it's just the overall offensive environment, right?
Right.
And so, like, I mentioned not mining too deeply on bad offenses. Well, right now in Dallas, the piece I want to play is Rico Dowdle, and I've like had a
Yeah.
blind spot to him all year. But that's to me the surface, right? Everything else you're taking your chances on. It seems to me in Miami that's a similar circumstance. So like if you catch one of the running backs working properly, you're going to be very happy. Other than that, I feel like you're taking your chances with the other pieces. And not that, Tua Tagovailoa's 5-yard A dot worries me with Tyreek Hill, but he hasn't been putting it together. It hasn't been happening for him. And so I
Yeah.
know that's all capable. And he could come out this week and have a huge game and make me feel stupid in the short term. That will be a point where I was incorrect in the moment. But I think in the bigger picture, I'm going to be correct on this one more than not.
Yeah, and they have a mixed schedule. I mean, that's the other thing. The NFL has gravitated to this haves and have-nots, like teams are in the AFC particularly. Teams are it's an anti-Pete Rozelle league where you will get a different idea of offenses and defenses from week to week depending on who the opponent is. So yeah, against the Raiders this weekend. Because the thing about the Dolphins that made them so exciting to take for fantasy is they created spacing on the field like nobody else. And it just looked so easy for them to complete passes 15 and 20 yards downfield. It hasn't looked that way this year. The running game is still strong. And the other thing they do, and I think Matt Waldman might be willing to point this out, is they have runs that look like kickoff returns.
Right.
Uh,
That's yes.
I mean, and that stuff is still intact. Like you said, Devin Achan, that's your big success story from the Miami offense this year. But no, the offense success story through the air, it's just not happening. Go ahead.
It's part of this is opposing defensive coordinators stay up all night too, people, and they're
Yeah.
looking at film, they're watching. But that is true. I can think back to the Jordan Rodriguez article in the Athletic about what made this offense different, and it's like a bunch of super fast, super athletic players moving at speed against flat-footed defenders. Right?
Right.
I'm. It seems like the defenders have figured some things out about this since then.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, and to Mike McDaniel's credit, you going out and getting Johnny Smith, going out and I know that they said that he was pounding on the table for Malik Washington for a couple of rounds, right? Like he was like, everybody's like, can we take Malik
Right.
Washington now? Can we take Malik Washington now? So he had a plan for these guys to say, like, well, here's some other wrinkles, here's some other Jaylen Wright, here's some other things that we can do, or at least fortify the things that we do well, and we're not counting on it to stay this way in perpetuity. Really quick on the quarterback thing, and I just want to take your temperature on this because I'm not sure what to say. So you mentioned Cedric Tillman, and then on the other hand, I'll throw Brian Thomas Jr. into this conversation. Can we count on the teams that are clearly headed for top draft picks keeping in their best quarterback? I'm thinking because we had here Jameis Winston is this still? Well, of course he is. Dorian Thompson Robinson. I mean, if the owner comes in and says we're losing, then we're putting Dorian Thompson Robinson in. Likewise with Jacksonville. Oh, Trevor Lawrence coming back after the bye. Well, right now, I believe they're in position to have, if not the number one or two pick.
They need to
Um,
lose.
so should we be penciling in Winston and Lawrence as promised, or should we be penciling in the bad quarterbacks?
Bethard. I mean, like Mac. Although Mac Jones did channel his Patriots Day in that white
Mhm.
Jaguars helmet quite nicely, so maybe they'll just stick with that, the white helmet, Mac Jones, and that'll be bad
Mhm.
enough. So like I do think that those specific players, I'm still a little bit in on just because Brian Thomas Jr. can change the game with a single play, and probably that's the same reason I'm playing Tyreek Hill. I just don't have wide receiver one expectations anymore. He's a wide receiver three that can break you a big play, and I do think Cedric Tillman's a little stickier, right? And maybe he's just a player that all we needed to do was see. I mean, you look at his production since Amari Cooper left. He outproduced Amari Cooper's starting to the season in 2 games, right? He had outperformed in two
Yeah.
games, fantasy points wise, what Cooper had done up to that point. And granted, Cooper had the issue of playing with Deshaun Watson. Uh,
Drops, which tells me he just wasn't that motivated or
right.
interested.
That was a huge factor. So like I'm in on Tillman. I hope it remains Jameis Winston, who has been always a fantasy godsend, even if he's not an NFL, you know,
Mhm.
ideal for the NFL terms. He'll throw the ball down the field, and I'm all about that. So I'm probably more in on Tillman than I am on Brian Thomas Jr. or any of the Jaguars for that matter, except Evan Ingram, who who due to the position and his ability and the way the offense works, we've seen him without Christian Kirk. And God bless you, Parker Washington. You just can't quite get there, right? Can't quite
Yeah.
replicate that Kirk role like Evan Ingram can.
Right.
So I'm in on those guys, but I think in general, yeah, the Jags aren't heading in a good direction.
Do you trust though? Just real quickly to put a point on this. Do you trust Cleveland to keep Winston out there for the rest of the season?
I do. I mean, maybe I shouldn't. Now that you're asking me, I'm thinking about it. I think it's been a foregone conclusion for me. Um, because I think he's not that great NFL wise. It's been okay so far, but I think in the end, it's not going to be good enough that they're going to make the change. Maybe they will. I mean, I don't know. That seems that seems entirely possible now that you mention it. You've horrified me. Thank you, Bloom.
Well, and it's part of it's because they had to reaffirm that he was the starter
True.
going into this week
It's
when none of
true.
us were asking that. The other thing is, and then and the urban legend rumor was that Thompson Robinson was the backup the week that Watson went down because they
Correct.
didn't want the crowd chanting for Jameis Winston,
Correct.
and that's why they really quickly said, no, 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 Winston's going to start. Now that we need a new starter, Winston's going to start, and not just because Dorian Thompson Robinson's hurt. And I think if you want to tell a good story here in terms of them sticking with Winston, it's they know. I mean, when the Browns are saying it's possible that Deshaun Watson will play for us again. Okay, well, I got the message there. And if they have designs on Winston being the starter next year to try to keep the team respectable instead of just blowing it all up and tearing it down, then you're building a relationship here. You're not simply
Correct.
it's not just a ghost ship cruising to the top of the draft. We shall see. Okay, time always. We got to do a whole show off the rails in the off season, Bob. We just have to. There's too many things that people need to hear and know. But I've got to ask you. I want to go back to this. I'm not sure if we've delved into this topic because we've done a lot on cats, and I guess we haven't really quickly. And I don't want to spring this on you, and I don't want to go into any kind of. But can we just take a moment out to remember Ming? I think this is the first time you've been on
Yes.
since Ming joined the Ancestors. I don't want you to do a choke or anything like that, but just tell us, how did he become Ming and how did he come into your life?
So Ming the Merciless came into my life as a small kitten, 6 weeks old. I had a choice of two cats, and they looked very similar, except one had an M on his head, and the pattern of his head, and I thought that was cool. And so Ming, for 17 years, was by my side. He was
Oh, yeah.
a bigger part of my life than probably anything else. And I've since gone on, and I'm engaged, and I've moved to Texas. He came with me, but he has remained a huge part of my life. There wasn't a radio show, a day of work where he wasn't right next to
Mhm.
me every single day. He is part of the team, and I talked about this on the radio. I mean, like, the broadcast team he was part of. He's right there, and so just it's hard to put into words. I had a friend, like, Ming was about 6 or 7 years old. He got lost, and
Oh,
he was lost, and it was like 2 days, and I'm in a panic, and I was lamenting to a younger friend, uh man, I'm never getting a pet again, man. They you
right,
always
you're exposed.
you're exposed, and they're not gonna last as long as you, and it's gonna be horrible. And this younger friend said to me, and I could say the same of you,
Mhm.
right? And it changed my whole thinking. Like, okay, so yeah, so Ming was found, that came around, and sadly he passed away. But I have 17 years of just joyous memories. Like, I can look down at the floor right here, and I say, there he is. I mean, it just
Yeah, yeah.
in my mind, and even my fiance, who has only known him the last 5, 6, 7 years. She walks past the spot. She looks. I see her. She
Yeah,
looks
yeah.
down, and like, and and she's not cat people. She became cat people just because he was a force. 30 pounds, by the way, people, of Ming, due to
That's
my
love. That shows me how much you loved him.
it was my overindulgence in the whipped
30
cream.
pounds of love.
He
Yeah.
liked the whipped cream an awful lot, and I indulged that every opportunity I got. So, a great life for Ming, and like, that's a huge chunk of my life. Like, I turned 63 today, right?
Uh-huh.
That's 17 years of my life from my mid 40s, right? And
Right.
so, like, just it's a remarkable run, and I've not had another pet that I've been with that long, and I can't imagine, like, wishing anything other than like, would I have liked more time? Of course, but do I have regrets that that it ended? No, it was going to end,
Yeah.
and it ended as it should have, with me sitting by his side, making sure he wasn't afraid, and it was like, just like, it's everything I could have hoped for in a pet. And I don't know if I'll ever have that again. I have another little cat, Wally, who has been
Yeah.
with me quite a while
He and
now.
he's a and he's, a rough and tumble customer.
He is
He's
a
a he
rough. He's a rough. He's not changed at all. He's a little older now, and I think of him still as a kitten, because he
mhm.
came into our lives as a kitten. Later, Ming was well into his life, and I still think of him as young. And I realize sometimes, God, he's like over 10 years old now. I got,
Right, right.
like, what's going on? And so he's showing his wear and tear a little bit, and some of the antics he does with the wildlife, his interactions with the wildlife reflect that he's slowing down a little bit, which is a good thing.
They get the
Which is a
drop
good.
on him every now and then because
Which
cats
is a
are
good thing.
I love cats. I'm a cat person, but they're unrepentant murderers.
They are. He is, and Ming never was that, right? Ming outgrew that phase quickly. Wally has still not outgrown that phase. He's just not as good as it as he was.
Right.
I can remember him like when he was like a little shaver, like a year
Mhm.
old, coming over the back wall in Albuquerque, which was like 10 feet drop to the backside with a rabbit bigger than he was. Oh my god.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah, so I love, just a great like experience, and something I'll never part of my life that I'll never forget, and like I'll always have like tremendous memories, and zero regrets for having done that. And I credit my young friend Charles Hamilton for that great comment, because it really made me look at things a different way. Like, just
Yeah.
like I could say the same about you. Well, actually, yes, you could.
Yeah, it's all temporary. And look, to touch on what you said, may everybody have a pet that they love as much as and loves them as much as you and Ming loved each other, and your souls are intermingled now,
Yeah,
so to speak. I didn't realize what I did there. Freudian slip on the couch. And maybe next time you'll be the cat and he'll be the human or
entirely possible.
and but it's a beautiful thing. And to go back to what you said too about that feeling. Oh, man, because 'cause I'm, like, huddled up in the fetal position inside of myself trying to just be safe. But if you open yourself up, the grief is just in proportion to the love.
Right.
So, it's the attachment and then the loss of the attachment. It doesn't mean don't get attached, because that's what we're here to do, and I'm trying to talk myself into that more and more every day, and it's a good you got the right lesson from that. That's what we're here to do. We're here to love while we're here. We're here to get attached. We're here to make things grow, even if it's via whipped cream, opal are Siamese, same thing. My wife, love of my life, Kate, calls her Pear Bear, among other things, because she likes. There's just certain things she likes. She likes baked goods. She really likes anything that's baked, like
So,
crackers and pretzels and stuff like that.
so Wally has taken to cheese.
Oh,
He must have cheese, and he must have it constantly.
okay.
And of course, and of course, much to the chagrin of others in the house, I am a totally willing
Yeah.
co-conspirator
Oh, yeah. Oh,
in his need
totally.
for
Yeah.
cheese.
Yeah, it's hard to not be indulgent. Okay, we just have a couple minutes, and this is really something we could spend hours and hours on. But I wanted to touch on this today because one of the things when I think of Bob Harris, I think of the most is that you fly a lot, and you always would make a post like you're here in the airport, this particular airport, people watching,
I
right?
do.
And because I always like to say, I don't understand human beings, but I'm studying them so I can fit in with them while I'm here. So just give me, you just got like a minute or two. What have you learned watching people all the years? What do you learn about us humans?
I think mostly the confirmation that human nature is unchanged. Like, you go back and you read Shakespeare, or
Hmm.
go back further than that, and the same issues, the same problems, the same approaches to life that you saw then apply now. And you see, and the airport is like a compressed microcosm of all that: happiness, anger, angst, anxiousness, relief. All those things you see
Right,
in brief
right,
moments at an
right. Saying
airport.
goodbye, saying
Right, saying goodbye,
hello.
saying hello, a flight that was late that is now taking off, a flight that's missed, reschedule the line to reschedule a flight that's been canceled, the anger, and I mean, like, it's all there. It's all there, and I'm there for all of it. I don't let any of it affect me. I'm immune and impervious to the emotions at the airport, because I'm
Uh-huh.
so enjoy. Like, I don't care. Like, I fly standby a lot, so I don't always get on my plane. It's the nature of the beast, right? And so I'm perfectly happy, because if I spend 8 hours in an airport, to me is 10 minutes. It's just like I can't tell you how much I enjoy confirming that human nature is unchanged. It's just unchanged. It's the one reliable thing. It's the thing you can count on. We can go back and read the first pages of the Bible, and human nature is on display there, just
Yeah.
like it's on display at the airport, just like it was on display in Shakespeare, just like it's on display in the great literature of our time, right? So, like, it's just, I love that part of it. I love people. We're very predictable.
Well, or like it's on display in the Colts organization or the Bears organization.
Exactly.
But
That's part of it.
it is, and it's comforting. What you say is you're so comforting, Bob. And spending time with you is comforting, but specifically that the human nature is unchanging means again the story of the horse. Like, is this going to be good or bad? The latest
Yeah.
thing that happened. Well, let's see, and let's keep loving each other, and let's keep taking that. On the other hand, if you can get past the emotional attachment to what happens, like when you're at the airport, and you can just sit back and observe and watch, it is a joy. It is unbelievably stimulating and enriching. This world, all the stories, all the things are all just based on this world. This is the world that it all comes back to, that is absolutely gripping, astounding, just mesmerizing. And you always show us how to appreciate that, Bob. And it's so beautiful to get to spend this time on your birthday and celebrate you, celebrate all of the fantasy football people out there, because we love serving you. It's a privilege, it's a pleasure to get to spend time with you the way we do. And why do we love it so much? Because you're so classy.